Good morning, everyone. It's Monday, September 14th. From the San Antonio Express News, my name is Luis Vasquez, and this is your Express Briefing. All of the stories you need to know to start your day. You can expect mostly cloudy skies with a high of 91 in San Antonio today. Also, it should stay dry today, but there are chances of rain throughout the week. The high school volleyball season for UIL classes 6A and 5A starts today. The Reagan Rattlers are in the spotlight for our season preview, and they're well represented on our list of players to watch. Louis Zibden Jr., a longtime San Antonio pastor who dedicated his life to helping others often forgotten by the rest of society, has died. Among loved ones and friends, he's remembered as a man who'd open up his own home to anyone in need, someone who'd give of himself beyond what anyone else could imagine. Marina Starley-Freiker has more on the man who helped start SAM Ministries. And now let's move on to our top stories for the day. The San Antonio Zoo's answer to the pandemic-spawned slowdown, which was allowing families to drive along the zoo's walkways to see the animals, has kept the landmark attraction in business. When officials announced the drive-through zoo in late April, tickets for the first tour sold out in 90 minutes, said Tim Morrow, the San Antonio Zoo's president and CEO. Since then, the tours have brought in more than $1 million in revenue. Despite the success, Morrow said the zoo still remains financially troubled. Randy Diamond explores the situation for the San Antonio institution and examines the plans for the future of the drive-through zoo. Alicia and Colton Ford met while stationed overseas with the Air Force 9 years ago and had been trying to have a baby for nearly 5 years, an effort that had included many losses. The Fords then decided to try in vitro fertilization. By early February, Alicia was pregnant with twins. Her due date was October 28th, their 8th wedding anniversary. Then, she came down with COVID-19. When Alicia's pregnancy specialist discovered that one of the twins wasn't growing, doctors performed an emergency cesarean section. Alicia was only 26 weeks pregnant. Marina Starley-Freiker gives us a look inside the roller coaster of emotions inside of the neonatal ICU. A black jogger stopped by San Antonio police spent over 12 hours in custody before a county magistration hearing and an additional 37 hours before a lawyer was appointed to represent him, an ordeal some say is not right. The push to consolidate magistration, which is when a judge informs a defendant of the criminal complaint, sets bail, and appoints a lawyer if needed, has been the source of a long-standing feud between city and county officials. You can read more about the process and the things local leaders are considering to change in Emily Eaton's latest story. Columnist Gilbert Garcia writes, quote, "You can only endure so many campaign cycles of talk about Democrats flipping this state before it starts to feel like some guy assuring you every morning that he's on the verge of winning the lottery. This skepticism leads some to argue that Texas is fool's gold for Democrats. Gilberto Hinojosa disagrees with that take. The chairman of the Texas Democratic Party points to the growing diversity of the state and the fact that the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee is targeting to Republican-held Texas seats during this cycle. Hinojosa argues that a targeted advertising campaign by Biden could not only secure him the state's 38 electoral votes, it could boost Democratic congressional and state House candidates. You can read more about Texas's potential role in the presidential election at the link in this episode's description. To keep our readers up to date on the path of COVID-19, the Express News has built a dashboard of interactive graphics showing the spread of the virus in the San Antonio area, in Texas as a whole, and across the United States. We've also created an interactive map of San Antonio for COVID-19 testing sites that don't require a doctor's referral. You can find a link to the dashboard and the interactive map in this episode's description. Next up are your need-to-know headlines. You can find all of these headlines and more inside your Express News subscription. The Metropolitan Health District reported 142 new cases and 24 deaths from coronavirus Sunday, bringing the death toll above 1,000. A last-minute bill amendment at the Texas legislature secured tens of millions of dollars for developers of apartments. Don't call it affordable housing, one expert said. For the first time in its 37-year history, San Antonio's annual Martin Luther King Jr. March will go virtual over concerns that the coronavirus pandemic might still be a threat to the community in the new year. The Texas State Board of Education gave initial approval to an updated sex education curriculum for the first time in more than 2 decades, expanding lessons on contraception but leaving out references to LGBTQ youth and removing suggested language emphasizing the importance of teaching about consent. Texas officials have suspended the placement of children in the foster care system at the Whataburger Center for Children and Youth, a San Antonio facility that focuses on high-need kids 12 and older who have no place to go. In a move to prevent tragic outcomes involving the mentally ill, San Antonio police officers now are required to take a more measured approach when responding to mental health calls that involve weapons or acts of violence. A group of organizers looking to gut the union that represents San Antonio police officers have formally launched a petition drive to take their push directly to voters, aiming for next year. A longtime Bexar County court-at-law judge has been ordered to complete 2 hours of professional education after being admonished by the State Commission on Judicial Standards for denying a defendant due process. An insurer has sued an ice cream equipment manufacturer, alleging a defective freezer led H-E-B to issue a recall on ice cream and sherbet in 2018. Has the U.S. trade deficit hit a record under President Donald Trump, as Joe Biden said during a campaign appearance last week? We have a fact check for that you can find at the link in this episode's description. In split votes, the State Board of Education on Friday declined to use its veto power over 2 applications from charter school operators that now have final state approval to open campuses in San Antonio. Latinos make up the majority in Texas, but don't have the power or wealth. Business columnist Chris Tomlinson explains why Texas's future looks very different from its past. Proposed ballot drop-off locations in the community are a no-go this election cycle under Texas election laws, but the Express News editorial board thinks satellite election offices should be considered in the future as ballot drop-off sites. Sports columnist Mike Finger writes, quote, "Thanks to the near-universal rebuke of a colossally bad opinion, Dak Prescott's credibility as a leader will be higher than it's ever been." San Antonio's popular wrestling venue adapts to TV, but falls to progress. Husband and wife promoters Frank Brown and Dorothy Livengood ran the Wrestlethon for nearly 20 years, sticking with a successful formula of weekly wrestling nights with a few holiday specials featuring a range of performers/athletes in timed bouts. You can read more in Part 2 of Paula Allen's 2-part history column. In 1984, Jose Flores opened El Paraiso on Fredericksburg Road with dozens of flavors mixed from Mexican recipes. His frozen treats are still bringing out the crowds, be it summer or winter. Whether it's San Antonio's common 100-degree summer heat or chilly midwinter temperatures, generations of families have frequented the store he opened with his wife, Maria, and daughters Maggie, Elizabeth, and Acuña, and son Jose Flores III. The family might not know every customer by name, but every face is a familiar one. You can read more about the store's history and how the pandemic has changed the business in this week's edition of San Antonio Stories. This week, we have 3 routes mapped out with spots not to miss and restaurant recommendations for your next trips to Medina Lake. There's so many reasons to love mi tierra. Pizza isn't one of them. Read our 52 weeks of pizza review of Zapata's Pizza at Mi Tierra to find out why it received the low score of once is enough. Also, Paul Steven explains why you need a reversible stovetop cast iron griddle. In college football news, Texas and UTEP came together in Royal Memorial Stadium on Saturday night to play some football. Little about the night felt normal, aside from the game itself. Meanwhile, UTSA earned a season-opening win over Texas State. And that's all for today. This was your Express Briefing for Monday, September 14th. My name is Luis Vasquez. Please consider becoming an Express News subscriber so you can get in-depth coverage on all the stories you heard today. Also, be sure to rate and review this podcast inside of your Apple Podcast app, as it really helps the show. Have a wonderful day, everyone.